Hello, everyone. This is a very important live broadcast, and maybe you watch it later, recorded, where we will go into the dramatic situation that has unfolded in the markets and that is going to unfold over the next 90 days, because we are not through the worst. Maybe we are through the worst, but we are not done. We have 90 days to go, and who knows what's going to happen. So first, I want to recapture what we actually went through all together in the markets with Tesla shareholders or Mag 7 shareholders, or if you're just an ETF holder, it doesn't matter. You have probably seen crazy things the same way all of us saw crazy things if you were not living under a rock. So what did the markets do and what happened? As you are probably fully aware, here we see the NASDAQ, for example, and here you see what happened yesterday on April 9th. You saw this insane rise that is very rare historically. I think it was the second largest jump of the indices we have seen in like 25 years or something. So it was an enormous thing. And what happened? Well, President Trump announced that he is going to postpone the implementation of very high tariffs, the very high tariffs he showed at Liberation Day, for 90 days, and instead just puts a 10% tariff across the board for all countries in place. And that led to this crazy relief rally yesterday that also resulted in stocks like Tesla, for example, going up 22%. So Tesla was at 229 and then went up to an insane, 272. And similar things are true for the indices. So Trump announced this 10% flat tariff, and at the same time also doubled down on the China tariffs. And what that means is that my prediction was actually pretty spot on. I had a bunch of videos out throughout this whole crisis from Thursday after Liberation Day all the way to, I think, Tuesday. And I covered that already on Saturday. I was saying this is targeted not towards the world, but it's targeted towards China. And this was also what the outcome of this big relief was, that Trump said, you know what? I put the entire world on notice, but who I really wanted to get at is China. So surprise, yesterday he said, you know what? Everyone goes back to 10% or down to 10%, but China goes to 125%. So it's an isolation of China. And we also see that now that conversations have changed dramatically with the European Union, for example, that first came out very hostile against the United States, and now doesn't talk about retaliation much. They all talk about, oh, we should have a conversation. They all start now, you have to read between the lines, also point out it's very important to not allow China to dump all their goods into the European market, dump all the goods that they can't export to America, not into European markets. And the EU is saying that, which tells you a little bit what these negotiations are really about behind the scenes. The same with Japan. These negotiations are now about the US building an alliance globally with all the other countries to isolate China with the ultimate strategic objective. And I will go into that in a second, what the objectives here are, but the ultimate strategic objective to push China off this dangerous growth path they were on, to become a rival of the US, and not just a rival, maybe overtake the United States, take Taiwan, become a military aggressor with enormous spend growth in military spending in China. We observed over the last few years or decades, or the last decade. All of that had to stop. And that is how I view the situation now. And that informs also the next 90 days. So from a strategic perspective, there is a surface level goal of Trump's activities, and there's a deeper strategic goal. The surface level goal is that Trump wants manufacturing back in the United States. He thinks the trade deficits with the rest of the world are unfair, and he wants to incentivize through tariffs, through 10% tariffs, the repatriation of manufacturing capability, generally incentivize everyone, produce your stuff in the United States if you want to sell here. Otherwise, you have a 10% tariff, and that creates generally a forcing function that will be good for the United States. And 10% are not too crazy. I said in another video that we have to not forget that these 10% are not the last word. These 10% are the target for now to get it going. But all the old tariffs, the very high tariffs from Liberation Day on the rest of the world outside China, are still debated. They are still the subject of negotiation, because in 90 days on July 9th, all of that stuff kicks back in. And we should not forget that. That is also why I said this relief rally is overdone, because what do we have achieved? We only have achieved a proposal, and we have achieved a clear signal that there should be negotiations, but they are not done. They're in the middle of it. So of course, it's a huge de-risking, but the game is not done. We are in the middle of the game. Of course, Trump holds all the Trump cards in his hand. So it's looking good. I think the game will end very nicely. I also have my suspicions what the ultimate objective is. I will talk about this at the end of the video or the live stream. But that is the surface level goal. Get manufacturing back to the United States. But then there's a much deeper goal. And the deeper secondary goal, or not secondary, second goal, just less visible, is a geostrategic restructuring of the globe, a realignment of everything on Earth to a new regime, the regime of Trump's America. And that addresses a bunch of very problematic things that we have seen for the United States over the past few decades. The rise of China. And this is not just about the economy. It's about national security. It's about dominance. It's about, do we really want to allow a major rival to just rise and rise and rise and give them all the unfair advantages? Or do we actually push them fundamentally off the trajectory? So in order to achieve that, and that is a layer independent, orthogonal to the actual economics layer, there's also part of the negotiation. Which countries will align with the United States? And there are two regions that are especially important: the EU and Japan. They need to come on board and become true allies in this operation. They both have their own interests to be allies, because they also don't like what's happening with China. And then, of course, the third region of Southeast Asia that needs to get in line. If Trump achieves to get all of them on board, to isolate China more and block China from dumping and exporting too many goods into these countries and destroying their economies, then China will be in enormous strategic trouble. And I think that is the actual objective. If that objective is achieved by Trump, it secures another 20, 30 years, if we don't talk about AI and AGI, but just in regular terms, in regular geostrategic terms, it would secure another 20 or 30 years of US dominance. I think that is a very clear goal of this whole thing, and the economics just play into that goal and are being used to get towards this goal. I just wanted to, outline that so we understand from a stock perspective what really is going on here and can predict better the next moves. What I like about these moves is that there is a certain fundamental alignment already with Japan, also with the EU on an interest level, right? It's not that they have diverging interests here. They want the same thing. That's why I'm relatively bullish that this is going to work. Of course, the EU has horrible, incompetent leadership, and the EU is in a position where many of the elites are trying to destroy their own people for complicated reasons. And so that means that part of this whole operation will also be to fix Europe, because a strong Europe that actually follows its own self-interests is in the interest of the United States. If you had a Europe and European countries, if you had a Germany, for example, that wants Germany to be strong, that would be much better for Trump, because you could handle that country much better. You could talk to them, they could be competent, you could align your interests and operate. But if you have a Germany that is ruled by elites that fundamentally want to destroy Germany, which is happening right now, it makes the negotiation much more complicated. Same is true for France. The same is true for UK and many other European countries. So I think, even though Trump is not too deep into that there's a team that surrounds Trump, specifically J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel, who are connected. In a way, also Steve Bannon, and of course, Elon Musk, who understand that, who are very Europe-centric and have an interest in fixing Europe. You know that Elon spoke up a lot. You know that Bannon speaks up a lot about the UK. You know that J.D. Vance speaks up about both Germany and the UK, and also chipped in on France. So I think the team surrounding Trump, not so much Trump himself, really wants to get Europe fixed. That means being anti-EU and dismantling the EU, propping up and organically strengthening the most important European countries. And we know that coincides with the big kind of revolution that's going on in Germany and in France, in Sweden, all over the place. And I think they are coming in at the right moment in time. The AfD is now the strongest party in Germany. So on top of these negotiations of the tariffs, and in addition to the realignment that Trump wants for the world against China, Europe is exactly at the right moment that the inner forces of European change fall basically on the same force vector as the Trump effect. So this will be very interesting to observe. Okay, so this is not going to play out in the next 90 days, but in the next 90 days, these vectors are very important because they will answer the question how successful Trump is in these negotiations. And our interest as shareholders or as people who are in the market generally is that Trump should get as much as he wants. And what he truly wants is actually low tariffs, free trade zones with all of these countries, and the removal of all trade barriers towards the United States. That is Trump's real goal. And he's putting on all these tariff threats to force these countries to remove all the trade barriers, and also to force them on the other side to put up trade barriers against China. I think given the situation, I have a certain confidence that he gets more than people expect, and that will put the US in a very strong position. But we should also be aware from a market perspective, these will be long 90 days. There will also be a very strong, hot trade war with China, and that will not be settled. There's talks about, there's negotiations with China. Depending on how bad the situation is in China, maybe they make concessions, but it will be very difficult. And we have to be prepared for major problems on the China-US side. I would also be prepared for major progress on all other sides. What that means for the markets is I would be very cautious about volatility. So what do? Well, I put this post up yesterday, I think around 3 p.m. ET or something. And what I said here is, while I'm thrilled about today, obviously, when I look at the portfolio, I shifted 50% of my Tesla leaps. Leaps are long-term call options, December 2026, back into stocks. So when Tesla dropped a lot, I actually turned some stocks into leaps to have more leverage to the upside again. Then this mess happened. And even though I was still at a loss with these leaps, I decided to shift 50% of my leaps holding back into stocks. So the way I'm doing this is like when I think Tesla is oversold, I'm shifting stocks into leaps to have more leverage up, but more risk. And when I feel, now we are getting to a critical level, I'm shifting them back into stocks, into Tesla. Because I always want to be invested in Tesla. It's never good to get out of the stock, in my opinion, given the macro situation with AGI, with Robotaxi. Similar things are true if you're not a Tesla shareholder, but you have other cool stocks like Palantir and NVIDIA and so on. I think this is not a time to sell these stocks if you have high conviction. So you want to always be in there. But if you want more leverage, you can play these little games. I felt not comfortable after yesterday's huge gain. I saw the leaps like, now they're looking kind of good. Let's get out, shift back into stocks and be a little more defensive here. And guess what happened today? Not too hard to predict. NASDAQ is down, nearly 5%, S&P 4%, Dow Jones 3.3%, Tesla, where's one day down $21. That's a lot. Because after an insane leap like this, that is not really based on much than just a relief rally, I knew it's going to go down. I was rarely as sure as I was then. So that was a good deal. So basically today, I said today was driven by irrationality and short covering. I do not believe we are set up for a rally from here, but the opposite, because now we are looking at 90 days of stress, back and forth of China escalation, some successes on the other sides. Then there's still Russia, which is very disappointing that there is no peace yet. Russia is also part of this whole equation because pressure on China means pressure on Russia, because China is the big supporter of this Ukraine war. So, now there's more pressure on Russia. So that's another positive catalyst that I think it accelerates a peace deal with Russia, even though I'm not sure that this actually happens. I was wrong in predicting Trump would get it done quickly. Trump was also wrong. So Putin didn't behave the way I like to see, and I think he will suffer for that, but he overplayed his hand. Now we are in the situation. I think that also played a role in this whole Trump operation, that he got so aggressive with China. If he gets China on their knees, Russia is also done. So I do believe the fear of a systemic collapse is gone. That was always an irrational fear, but it looked very scary on Monday. And that Tesla is somewhere around here, well positioned to look towards a rally with earnings and June coming closer. But very short term, I'm cautious. So now is very short term. Next day, this thing, it keeps dropping. Why is it switching back? And I think, let's see what happens. Like down here, it's getting more like, appetizing again. I think Tesla generally, to conclude this, Tesla generally, very short term this week is, of course, shaky. But Tesla, now we are basically in an environment where we have a little breathing room to actually refocus on fundamentals, on the fundamental things that are going on with Tesla. And why I'm so much talking about Tesla, because I think it's the best investment right now in the market, the best risk return opportunity. But why? There are other cool opportunities too. What do they all have in common? They are in the eye of the storm of the age of AGI. And while all this crazy restructuring of Geostrategy is happening, we should never forget that the big deal in our time is AI, the revolution. That we live through a time that is totally unprecedented, that while everyone is talking, war and Ukraine and Taiwan and tariffs and macro markets, that the real revolution that is happening as we speak is a complete transformation of our world through AI and soon AGI. And with AGI, I simply mean AI that can replace humans in jobs. I believe that we will have no jobs left by 2030, effectively no jobs. There will still be humans doing something, getting paid, a few. But I think the wave that is coming is much, much more destructive for the job market than anyone tells you. I think it is a much bigger disruption than anyone tells you. And I think this disruption is coming much faster than anyone tells you. And I'm talking about a real inflection in 2027 and a lot of carnage already starting to happen in 2026 and end of this year. And of course, this is not purely destructive. Technically, it's a huge productivity leap for humanity, an enormous, infinite productivity leap, but at the cost of all human jobs. That is the big story here. There will be a massive concentration of capital and growth in the real AI stocks like Tesla, others too, NVIDIA and so on. But Tesla captures the most value as I see it right now. And that is the opportunity we shouldn't overlook with all these tactical macro situations right now. And so for me, these 90 days allow us to refocus on what's actually happening on Tesla, that there's a robotaxi launch in June that could be history making. And most people don't see it like this, but it absolutely could be history making. If they pull it off, it's a commercial robotaxi. This means autonomous transport is actually here in a scalable way. And that means global transportation is going to be completely disrupted over the next 5 years worldwide, to the extent there will be no public transport, there will be no cars driven by humans anymore. Again, this is also going to happen much faster than people think, because it's such an economic disruption. If you can deliver 90 cents per mile rides without wait times, it's going to be a massive disruption. So that's why it's nice that we can focus on stocks again a little bit, and that the market moves are not totally dominating. But we should be aware for the next 90 days, it will be tricky. And then in 90 days, we have to be prepared for some turmoil again, right? Because what happens on July 9th? The whole thing starts all over again, less extreme because now we are prepared. But then it's all the question, who has actually done a deal? And we will observe that over the next 90 days. So focus on AI, focus on Tesla, and whatever stocks you have, now is the time to refocus on that. But keep in mind, July 9th is coming up. And in between, there will be a hot trade war with China. And so we have to be a little more defensive and a little more be prepared for crazy turmoil in the markets that can break out at any moment. I hope that was helpful. Let's see what questions we have here. Joe, add me to the Tesla engineering group. Well, you guys, yes, I will look through this. Sorry, I'm super late on this. But you guys also have to go to pioneerlands.net. I will put it into the chat. It's also in the description here. Pioneerlands.net, because we are transitioning over there. It's free. You can go there and sign up, because that is actually very, we are building an amazing group on pioneerlands.net to prepare everyone for the age of AGI, to know how we trade, to exchange information on capital markets, but also some other questions that are important. Vikram Sharma, I own 1,000 plus Tesla stock and it's 90% of my portfolio. Yes, that's interesting. Good. What is your advice as there's so much volatility? Well, I think that was the whole video. I hope that was helpful, Vikram. Keep dollar cost averaging. That can never hurt. Be cautious with leverage, of course, right? If you have marginal leverage in these times, it is very dangerous. What's today's value of Tesla? You mean the shares at 147 or something? Am I German? Yes, I was born in Germany. Joe, what do you think about the huge inventory backlog of Cybertrucks and the fact that no one wants to buy one? I think Cybertruck is not that important for Tesla, obviously, like just as a fact. I think Cybertruck is the ultimate symbol of Tesla, so it's more under pressure than the regular cars. So I think Cybertruck, for me, was never a big deal. I don't think that moves the needle in either direction. I never was super bullish on Cybertruck moving the stock, and I'm not super bearish on it having a problem. I think it has a problem because of image, and if you drive a Cybertruck, you're too much out there and get some pushback. Then what do you recommend American students to study in college based on your current understanding? Well, that's why you have to join Pioneerlands. I'm working on a series on AGI disruption and what it all means. I'm still debating how I do it because it will be structured as what I call the Pioneer Academy. So where I share my thoughts on the future ahead, and then also how we become reality engineers, which is the only job that will be left in the future. There's nothing else to do in the future than envisioning better realities and starting to engineer them, as Elon does, as many already do, but it will be much easier and there will be nothing else to do. And that means our universities are probably toast. I think they cannot restructure enough, and you need new types of educational institutions that become training grounds for exactly that. How do you learn very rapidly anything? How do you use AI for it? How do you envision what you want? How do you become a good economist and planning it all out financially? How do you convince people to join you? And then how do you build it, learn from your mistakes, and keep iterating this until you succeed? That is the central value creation mechanism. And I think that's the main thing people should actually learn. And that's what we need colleges for in the future. So right now, find a college where that comes closest to that has a lot of entrepreneurial stuff going on, where you can learn about AI. I'm not a big fan of colleges. I think they have run their course. Haugesund, Norway. Björn Erik Norders. Greetings to Haugesund. I don't know where that is. I know where Bergen is. I know where Oslo is. I've been to Narvik. That was pretty cold. The Faroe Islands. That's beautiful. They have very nice birds. I was there too. I had to throw up a lot on my travel to the Faroe Islands because that was very stormy. What are my thoughts on Apple stock? Well, there's an interesting thing that I think Apple called Trump and complained that they are completely screwed. I think they are completely screwed in this situation. And what Trump said that surprised me, was very Trump. He basically said there are carve-outs for individual companies potentially coming. So I think Apple wants a carve-out. If they can make it happen, good for Apple. So I'm very not bullish on Apple. I do not like Apple. I think their leadership is very weak. The leadership is very unprepared for this age of AGI and innovation. I think if you rank companies, Tesla is very on top. NVIDIA is very on top. Palantir is very on top. Why? Because they are so smart and AI-centric. I think Apple is just super weak on AI. Google, for example, I absolutely hate, but I love YouTube. And I think Google is, of course, a strong player in AI. So even I have personal resentments against Google, I still have to say it's probably not the worst stock. Apple, I don't like. Amazon, I think Jeff Bezos, who's still very involved, Amazon is always underrated because they're very quiet about things, but they're also doing a lot of AI things. Apple had the ultimate opportunity and they just don't have what it takes. They should have a humanoid robot, obviously. That's the next Apple product, and they have no chance doing it. So Not a big fan, and these tariff China trade wars will hurt one way or the other Apple, even if they get a carve out. I think it's just very bad for Apple. Canada. I always have the song "Blame Canada" from South Park, but I don't blame Canada. Canada's beautiful. Very good, thank you. LA. That is kind of, I lived in the Palisades, so greetings to LA. Alles Gute aus Deutschland from Sebastian. Thank you. And I have seen crazy things from Odyssey. Yes, crazy things. So, Grenada in the Caribbean. Wow, we have Isla. We have people from everywhere. That's amazing. So I have to wrap up, but good to talk to you guys. I hope that was helpful, and see you very soon. We'll be back tomorrow. See you then.